In February 2002, the small town of Hudson, Wisconsin, was the site of a homicide that left local law enforcement without a single clear answer for years. Two men, director Dan O'Connell and intern James Ellison, were found dead inside the O'Connell funeral home. The crime scene suggested a specific type of perpetrator. Both victims had been executed at close range, with no evidence of a struggle, indicating a killer who was comfortable with high-powered firearms and capable of clinical precision. Despite conducting nearly 2,000 interviews, detectives couldn't produce a viable lead. The investigation stalled, eventually turning into a cold case that remained unsolved for over 2 years. The initial investigation failed because the killer lived a life built on a foundation of absolute community trust. He wasn't a career criminal. He was a figure the town had been conditioned to never suspect. In 2004, investigators received a tip unrelated to the homicide, describing a local clergyman providing alcohol to minors and exhibiting a pattern of inappropriate behavior. That tip led them to 31-year-old Father Ryan Erickson, a Roman Catholic priest whose private life involved an intense interest in firearms and multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. When Erickson arrived for questioning, he wore his full clerical robes. He used the visual weight of his office to project an image of moral immunity, treating the detectives' early questions with the detached air of a man who believed he was above suspicion. Detectives now faced a suspect who viewed the interrogation as a formal audience rather than a criminal investigation, relying on his status as a priest to deflect every line of questioning. To test his credibility, detectives asked Erickson to draw his route. He produced conflicting paths and movements that were geographically impossible. Beneath these errors lay a total void. Erickson had no explanation for his whereabouts between 12:30 and 3 p.m., the time frame of the deaths. He attempted to fill these hours with vague spiritual obligations, claiming he might have been praying in isolation or visiting various chapels. It was an unverifiable alibi that relied entirely on the detective's willingness to take a priest at his word. Detectives observed that while Erickson's recall for peripheral details was sharp, his memory only failed during the hours most critical to the homicide. To an experienced investigator, this specific form of amnesia is as identifying as a fingerprint. The detectives shifted their strategy, moving away from the timeline to press Erickson on the forensic evidence recovered from the funeral home. During this exchange, Erickson mentioned specific details about the placement of the fatal shots and noted the exact positions of the bodies near the desk and a doorway. This information was cataclysmic for Erickson's defense. Neither the public nor any of the previous 1,900 interviewees had been told where the victims were found or how many times they had been shot. By providing forensic details known only to the shooter, Erickson had effectively ended the search for a suspect. The detectives were no longer testing an alibi. They were now building a case for a formal confession. A specific motive emerged during the probe. Dan O'Connell had recently confronted Erickson about his behavior with minors. The funeral director intended to report these violations, placing the priest's entire career and reputation at immediate risk. When challenged on the murders, Erickson claimed God allowed it, framing it as divine plan to deflect personal responsibility. The detectives applied a final pressure point. They threatened to contact the local bishop to formally discuss the evidence of his misconduct with minors, attacking the institutional authority Erickson used as his primary defense. Erickson's composure did not break when he was questioned about murder. It only shattered when the investigators threatened to strip away his position in the church, the shield that allowed him to operate as a predator. A forensic search of Erickson's computer revealed illegal images of children. He had hidden these files deep within system paths, disguised with names of religious folders and prayers. On December 19, 2004, just days after the interrogation and the search of his residence, Father Ryan Erickson took his own life. In his suicide note, he wrote that his lust and pride had prevented him from being a better person. While he admitted to hurting people, he continued to deny the murders until the end. Despite his silence, a judge officially ruled Erickson responsible for the double homicide. A deacon later testified that Erickson had privately confessed to the killings, stating he had done it and knew the police were closing in. The end of the legal case revealed a final, disturbing truth about Erickson's behavior in the 2 years following the murders. During the long investigation, Only one member of the local clergy regularly visited and provided spiritual counsel to the widow of Dan O'Connell. That person was Ryan Erickson. By acting as her primary source of pastoral care, the killer was able to maintain close contact with the victim's family and monitor the progress of the investigation from the inside. Religious authority typically serves as a conduit for community support. In Erickson's hands, however, the office became a shield for a predator, facilitating both the initial crime and the prolonged deception that followed.